Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I'm doing things a little bit differently today. I've come to a little spot that I walked past without my camera a long time ago actually, and I said to myself, that's got a really nice potential little area there for a nice long exposure seascape image. So I've come there this morning and I'm basically gonna hopefully go and get a shot there, come back, edit it, and give you a bit of an A to B process from start to finish of how I would handle taking a photo, editing a photo, and obviously showing you the before and after. So if you like this format and you watched the full video and you thought it was really interesting, then let me know in the comments. And if you didn't, then I guess I'll never make another one of these again. Well, this is not the shot I've got in mind, but obviously it'd be rude not to take a couple more images while I'm here. If I get the main shot is the one I'll be editing in the video today. All right, let's move over to the spot where I actually wanted to take the shot. As you can see behind me, there's this lovely groin or wooden thing leading out into the sea here. Now, the sky, absolutely zero detail drama or anything. It's quite foggy in the distance, very foggy over that way. And there's not much wave motion either. So again, no fact behind this, just personal opinion. When you have a day like this, and I'm trying to shoot a long exposure, my initial reaction is to go really long with the exposure and look for super minimal, ghostly, ethereal shots, instead of shots that show a lot of drama, which in most cases have a bit of a quicker exposure, 1 to 2 seconds, to show that wave motion, to show that movement a little bit less in the sky. But we have no movement in the sky, there's no clouds up there, no sunrise, and the waves aren't crashing against the wood, so we don't need to go really fast with that exposure. Something I see way too often with long exposures, especially people that have maybe just got their first filter and they're diving into it for the first time, they see something like running water or water and they just think, right, long exposure because there's going to be motion there, and they might walk up to the front of the beach here, stick the camera on the tripod and take a photo with a long exposure, or see a stream and just take a photo with a long exposure. But because you've chosen to take a long exposure, that's not really the point of the photograph. You've still got to have something that is the point of the photograph, much like this huge wooden groin here that's running out to the sea. That's the point of the image. If you've got a big pier, that would be the point of the image. Or if you're taking a photo of a waterfall with autumn leaves all around it, yes, the waterfall's there, but you've still got to come up with a pleasing frame. You can't just take a photo because it's going to be a long exposure. Anyway, I've got my settings set up here on the camera, so what I'm going to do now is, took a test shot to make sure my exposure is good. I am going to have to alter that slightly. So now I'm going to work around and try and find a really nice frame. This little rock pile down here in the left hand corner of the frame that I really like. And then I've made sure I've captured the back wall of the harbour there, in between the gap in the wooden groin. I've got the ND46 on the front of the camera, and let's do a little settings check. We're going F10, 8 seconds for the exposure, ISO 100, and that is overexposing by about half a stop, but that's fine because then we can bring the highlights down a little bit in post and make sure there's still enough detail in the wood. We don't want that wood to be like murky and muddy, so I'm going to take a shot here. We'll wait for the waves to do something nice. That's actually come out really nice. I think as well because the flat, soft, bright light coming from the sky is making the sand look pretty orange and vibrant. So in post that'll actually come out really nice. So I'm gonna take a couple more here just to get some differences in the waves and stuff like that, although I am going for a very clean look. So this shot here is probably potentially more what I had in my mind when I saw the conditions when I came out this morning and knew that I was going to be taking a long exposure. But I'm not sure if I even like it as much as the first shot, but I'm going to take it anyway. So again, here we've got the 4:6 ND on portrait orientation this time, and we're going f9 and about 6 seconds for the exposure. And there's very little motion in the water still, but given the conditions, it still properly sort of smooths out and gives it that really glassy look. I would have liked a bit more colour, but let's do it. And I think this would definitely be a shot that's deliberately shot for black and white. And I think that's a tip that really helps in photography. If you already know what you're shooting for when you take the photo, when you get back in post, you already know the direction you're going in, which one saves you loads of time. It helps the images you're taking come together more often than not, because you've considered the entire process and how you're going to edit the image after and what it's going to look like, rather than just taking a scene and hoping that it turns out all right in post. Not necessarily something I do much, so that's probably why I still prefer the first one, but we'll see. I'll take a landscape one as well, and then I think I'm going to wrap up. Maybe look for one more shot, possibly, but let's get home and get editing so you can get a look at my process when I've got an image. All right, fast forward to the same evening. I'm going to edit this photo. I'm going to run through it quite in depth for those of you that have wanted quite an in-depth editing portion or segment of a video for a while. So I've chosen to go with this image, although I did say on the day I wanted to capture a really long, ghostly long exposure. Looking back through the images, one, this is one that I do really like, and two, in terms of editing, it's probably the one that needs the most amount of work doing to it. So this is going to have more value when it comes to showing you how I go about editing it. So I've already cropped this image up. I'll just go into my history tab and reset it for you. So here's the raw file here, and with the crop, all I did was sort of expand the aspect ratio to make it feel a little bit wider and then crop it up a little bit. So we come out with this, and of course, straighten that horizon. But I have got, I'm well past the date of needing to clean my sensor. There's a lot of spots on here, but I tend to do spot removal in Photoshop because it's way better, way more intuitive. Sometimes I will use the Visualize Spots tool, which, if you didn't know, you can press Visualize Spots when you're in Spot Heal, and moving this Visualize Spots around will show all those little imperfections on your sensor. So as you can see, I've got quite a lot up here in the sky that will need removing in Photoshop, or of course I could do it in Lightroom. Let's start running through this edit then. So lens corrections, I have remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections turned on. They always get turned on as soon as images are imported into my Lightroom, because it's set in my preferences for Lightroom to automatically apply those, because I want those on every single image. So you can see the correct lenses there, Sony FE16-35 f4, and just in case anyone wondered, this shot was ISO 320 at 22mm f8, and it was 1.3 seconds. So like I say, not that super 10 to 30 second long exposure that I was aiming for on this day. So I'm going to come down here to detail, and my import preset also automatically sharpens my images. But basically all it does is bring the three sliders to the middle like this. And then again, I can refine that further if I want. Noise reduction, I'm not going to touch for now. I don't really use it anyway when it comes to photography. But if I start bringing those shadows up and there is a little bit of noise creeping in, then I may go back and tweak that a little bit. For now, I'm going to leave it completely. So let's go down into our basics tab and start messing around with the sliders a bit. So I definitely want to warm this image up, because right now it's looking very cold, and I want to sort of play with this nice orange that we've got in the sand. And I know when I reveal it, there's going to be a decent amount of color in there. So I'm going to bring the temperature of our shot up quite a bit, and it's going to look a little bit strange to start off with. So I'm probably going to bring it up to about there. And when I bring this up, I'm mainly really just focusing on the foreground here and the eventual color that I want in that sand. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the shadows up straight away, and we're going to boost this quite a lot here, probably about 50, 48, something like that, to start bringing some of that detail out in the wood in the shot here. And then after that, I'm also going to bring the whites up, and I'm going to boost this quite a lot, I think, because if we take a look at our histogram here,
there's quite a little bit missing on the right hand side. So let's boost those whites up. Again, we're going to go quite far with it. What should we say, about 60? And now we're starting to get an image that looks a lot more like there was way more daylight and light in general when I shot it. It was quite dull and foggy and cold, as you know from the footage. So highlights and blacks for now, I'm going to leave where they are. I do want to play around with the highlights in the sky ever so slightly, but I don't want to affect the highlights in the rest of the image, so we're going to deal with that later. I'm going to bring the exposure up as well, just a touch, maybe like plus 0.10 or something like that. So texture, clarity and dehaze, I'm going to leave exactly where they are in the middle, but I've just realized my import preset also drops the clarity by default, but in this image, I don't really want to drop the clarity, so I'm just going to set that back to 0. And then vibrance and saturation, I'm really going to kick that vibrance up. So if you don't know the difference between vibrance and saturation, basically saturation is going to affect every single color throughout the entire image. So if I drag it all the way down, it's going to go completely black and white. Vibrance, however, only affects the colors that are already lacking saturation or vibrance. So if I pull the vibrance all the way down, you're still going to see some color here in the beach and the rocks. So there you can see, obviously it's not affecting the entire image. So I'm going to boost it up to probably about plus 50. That's a little bit strong actually. Let's dial it back to about 30, 32, that's fine. And then in doing that, I'm going to drop the saturation a little bit, just down to about -10. So basically those colors in the shot that needed a bit more of a pop, bringing back up to sit in line with the other ones that had plenty of color. So I'm kind of like in the baseline that we've got so far here. I don't think I'm going to apply a tone curve in this particular shot. So I'm going to jump down to the color mixer. And this is going to be really, really simple. I'm basically going to boost the saturation and luminance of almost all the colors. And I don't want to go overkill with it whatsoever. So the first little notch, the first point that you can see on the saturation slider, I'm just going to go down and push every single one up to there. Some of them, the colors won't even be present in the image, but you know, I might as well do them all while they're there. And then luminance, I'm going to do the exact same thing on it as well. I'm not messing around with the hues in this image whatsoever. Typically, I don't really go about changing hues, and I've said in a video before, for me, color accuracy to the scene at the time is very important. And at this point, I'm almost ready to move on to the Photoshop side of things, but I'm just going to revisit that sky now. So I'm going to go up to our masking tool here, which is the little circle icon, select that, and we're going to select our sky. And let's just check that that's a nice selection there. We have got a little bit of the wall in the background selected, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about that. And then I'm going to come down to the highlights and I'm going to drop that down quite a bit, about 40. I mean, there's not going to be much detail in there anyway, but it's just to kind of give it a little bit of something back rather than it feeling too white. And like I said at the start, I want to change those highlights to the sky separately to the rest of the image. Okay, so let's just do a before and after in Lightroom then. So if we press Y on our keyboard, we're going to bring up our before and after like that. And as you can see, it almost to me just looks like you've really bring the exposure up on the photo. The raw may look like I've underexposed, but I haven't. I've actually overexposed in that shot, which is funny. Overexposed, that's why exposure is so subjective in photography, because my camera at the time was telling me I was overexposing, but I was knowing that was exactly where I wanted my exposure, mostly for the water down here in the bottom portion and the sky as well. I didn't want the sky to be too washed out, but also I didn't really want that murky gray look either. Okay, so let's drag our image that we've just exported into Photoshop here, and I'm just gonna make our background white so it makes it a little bit easier to look at. And like I say, straight away, I'm gonna start off by getting rid of those spots that we had in the image. So for this, I'm gonna use the remove tool and just plonk a nice spot here or there on the sky. And then we've got one in the water here as well, and one up here on the horizon line. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do here is add a curves layer, because if you remember, I didn't do any curves or toning inside Lightroom, and basically that's because I'm going to drop the blacks in the curves a bit and give it a bit of a curve. Use the curves to do a bit of a curve. around about there. And then if we turn that off and on, that's basically the effect I want for the sky and the sky only. So then I'm going to draw a marquee tool here like this and color it in black. Of course, you can use masking and all sorts of different stuff to do this in Lightroom, but I just really like doing stuff like this in Photoshop. I also find Photoshop way nicer to work in than Lightroom, because Lightroom obviously uses raw preview files and all of that stuff, which kind of downgrades the quality of the image that you're looking at on the screen, makes it a little bit harder to edit in my eyes. So I like to get out of Lightroom quite fast and get it into a big Photoshop window where I can see it in full quality. So now I've removed that bottom half, I'm now just going to brush with the black brush tool slightly across the horizon so we don't have any horrible moment in the image where that curve starts. So if we turn that off and on now, you can see it just gives a slight bit of darkness to the top, and that's basically all I wanted it to do. Next, I'm gonna add a little bit of what I call a finisher preset of mine, and it's this here that I call Kodak Blue. So I'm gonna apply that, and as you can see, that's pretty strong. So I'm gonna dial that right back down to probably about 35 or so. So basically all that is there is a lookup table that I've turned into a Photoshop action with a particular look. So I can do that inside Lightroom as well if I want, but I don't always know if I want to apply it or what point of the edit I want to apply it. And then last but not least, I think I'm gonna dial a little bit of contrast back in, because if you remember, I bring that down a bit in Lightroom, but now I'm looking at the image much bigger inside Photoshop. I'm not particularly happy with the contrast there, so I'm going to just dial that back in, go to about 20. So nothing major in terms of the cleanup. Again, I'm going to grab our little remove tool here, zoom in a bit, and these little sort of annoyances in the sand down here, I'm just going to get rid of them, because I mean, I go sometimes into the remove tool and remove stuff that doesn't really need removing because they're not distractions. But at the end of the day, if I was to print this, I wouldn't, but if I was to print this, I don't want those little random things being picked up by anyone's eye. So I find it nicer just to get rid of them. That's looking pretty much spot on to me. The last thing I'm going to do is go ahead and grab our sponge tool, which is behind the dodge and burn right at the bottom there, and keep it on saturate. And I'm just going to brush across the bottom of the image here and give it a nice pop to bring out that orange in the sand. Another little thing that I do when I've finished an edit, I save the full version like this, and then I also save a version with a border. So let me just come down to my actions here and press medium border, which is automatically going to give us a nice white artsy border like that, fine art border if you will, and save a version of like that, because I never know where I'm going to showcase it or post it, and sometimes I do need a white border, so I always save a version like that, just so I don't have to go back and do that again, basically. Okay, so let me quickly throw the raw file on the screen here and throw the finished edit on the screen right here, and hopefully you can see that it's still a minimal edit, but in terms of the lighting and the color, we have changed the image quite drastically, and that's the beauty of raw files, of course, and it was shot with the edit in mind and shot knowing that it would look very dark as a raw file, but knowing that the data was there and I could pull lots out of it. So like I said at the start of the video, if you really like this format, then please let me know in the comments so I know to keep making them every now and again. I could do one a week, one every 2 weeks, whatever it may be, but just let me know if you find it helpful. And of course, if no one finds it helpful, then I won't make another one. Just thought it'd be something nice, a little bit, something different to do. And with all that being said, check out the video I made last week. I'll post it right here, all about why I don't plan my photography days all that much. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.